Hello, YouTube. Let me continue my narrative about cryptozoology in Russia, about cryptids, and namely Bigfoot and other creatures that this name has been applied to. When we talk about Bigfoot or abominable snowman, also known as Yeti, Almasta, Kaptar, Atsuri, and other names you can find in my videos about these creatures worldwide, you see the image of a mysterious ape-like creature in your mind. And people encounter such beings sometimes in remote mountain corners of the Himalayas, Caucasus, Pamirs, Siberia, China. But it turns out, for people in the European Russia, one doesn't have to go to the edge of the world to encounter this creature or monster, as some refer to it. A lot of information about this mysterious creature is collected not so far away from Moscow and other European Russian cities. For example, on the territory of the Samara region, and I'll describe this region later to you. For example, you can get acquainted with the story of the Moscow resident Lurie. It was recorded by the famous Soviet cryptobiologist Bykova. According to the narrator, this incident happened to him in the year 1930 in the vicinity of the town of Chapayevsk in the Samara region. This account was actually published in the famous and brave Soviet magazine Technika Молодежи, issue number 9 in the year 1988. By that time, a lot of the ideological chains were taken off the paranormal subjects in the Soviet Union under Gorbachev, and a lot of interesting information started being published in regional and central newspapers of the Soviet Union. And here is what it said. An incident came back to me with all clarity, under the impression of which I was right up to the World War II. As a student, I was conscripted to the Flame of Revolution commune, which is 60 versts from the city of Chapayevsk. It was believed that once you had a driver's license, you could drive a tractor. So, however, that's what it turned out like. At a certain place, they were waiting for us at the visitors' designated farmstead. We got there around 23 hours. The officer on duty at the farmstead, where the wagons from the district were being put together, confirmed that they were waiting for us from this Flame of Revolution commune. The wagon train consisted of 3 sledges. One was loaded and the other 2 were empty for us. Sheepskin coats were also provided. 2 of the carters, haulers, had rifles. It was very cold. Nevertheless, a sharp warming was expected at night, during which allegedly, literally in a matter of hours, these paths would become impassable. Therefore, it was necessary as much as possible to get on the road as soon as possible. At 1 o'clock in the morning, together with an employee of the GPU, referring to the secret police, the convoy set off. The terrain was open and rugged. The sled crept up the hill and then rolled down. It was a full moon, completely cloudless but very windy. At some angles, the snow sparkled dazzlingly. There began to be quite dense clumps of trees and then significant tracts of forest. The road never went through the forest, but all along the edge. In one area, the horses began to be anxious, and when asked about the reason, the driver replied that wolves are playing pranks here, and therefore they have rifles with them, referring to the drivers, to the carters. However, the horses carried on. The road ran just along the edge of a completely overlooked forest area. At the turn, the front sledges with a load turned over. The horse snored and struggled and then stopped. So did the others. The following situation has developed. The drivers from the second sleigh or sledge went ahead to help the first one. The second and third carters remained with the horses, holding them by the bridle. The secret police employee and I got off the last ones in our wagon train and began to warm up on the road behind them. As it turned out, our legs were completely numb. We were facing each other. I'm facing forward as I move, and he's facing me. The frost was ringing, and we stamped our feet in silence to somehow bring our feet back to life. Suddenly, a numbing terror seized me. Looking into my companion's face, which was turned towards me, I saw his distorted face looking past me behind my back. My legs felt like they were made of cotton. I was numb, and I didn't have the strength to turn around or even turn my head back. But still, apparently my head turned at some minimal angle, and out of the corner of my eye, about 12 or 15 paces away, I saw a creature, a biped, as they now say, basketball player-sized, with legs wide apart, arms reaching to the knees. He had huge shoulders, probably twice the size of a human, without a neck. The head is massive, tapering upward, overgrown with hair. It was all clearly visible as it was illuminated by the moon and, as the photographers say, in the background. I couldn't make out the features of the face or muzzle. I just saw two wide-set eyes, angry, burning with red fire. It took only a fraction of a second for all this vision. The GPU or GPU officer facing me pulled a revolver from his bosom and fired several times over my shoulder in the direction of the creature. It turned out that the revolver was right next to my ear. Whether he hit the creature or not, I do not know. Again, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the creature running towards the forest. Hunched over, it ran without bending its knees, swinging its arms in sync with the movements of its legs. Right leg, right arm, left leg, left arm. Then it disappeared into the forest. One of the carters was shooting after him with a rifle. When everyone calmed down somewhat, the carters said that it was a bolshak, that he didn't live there, but came there in wintertime, but not every year, that he would bully cattle, but they don't remember him touching people. Bolshak is a deity of the forest in pagan Slavic mythology. I try to stay as true to the narrative published in the magazine as possible, just adding some notes for non-Soviet and non-Russian people who listen to this narrative. Now, moving on, almost 60 years after the encounter I just described, one of the Samara journalists recorded a monologue by an eyewitness about the same subject. And this time it was from a resident of the village of Rozdestvino. And his name was Sapoznikov. The villager's story, in the form of a letter to the editor, was published on the pages of the regional newspaper Volskaya Komuna. Here it goes. On November 27, 1989, when I went outside in the morning to clear the light snow that had fallen at night, I saw some kind of unusual footprint. What kind of beast was walking? It's not even clear if it's four-legged and two-legged. The step was straight, but his step was uneven. The distance between each footprint is from 450 millimeters to 2 meters. The footprint is 180 millimeters in diameter. It can be assumed that while walking, he slipped several times, leaving parallel dents, scratches with claws, 17 to 18 millimeters wide. A lot of people were watching, and no one recognized whose trail it was. Soon after that publication, some of the skeptics tried to present this testimony from the resident of Rождествено as another tale about the Bigfoot. However, just a month later, at the other end of the Samar Luka in Togliatti, it's a city, specialists recorded the story of a retired mechanical engineer by training who asked not to state her last name in case of publication. The author of the actual recording is a member of the Avesta non-governmental organization for the study of anomalous phenomena. A lecturer at the Samara Aerospace University, candidate of technical sciences, Sergei Markelov. It happened on the night of December 31, 1989, that is on New Year's Eve. It was after midnight when I heard an incomprehensible growing hum. I went to the window of the first floor and saw that something was heading towards the main entrance of our building, which on closer inspection turned out to be Bigfoot in his classical description. The creature's appearance was consistent with the information I had read in books and newspaper articles. It was covered with fur, about 2 meters tall, had a distinctive simian face, and so on. After stomping at the stairs, the creature made the same long, drawn sound that I had heard before encountering him, and went around the corner of the building. On the freshly fallen snow, there were well-imprinted footprints of this creature. Their size is about 40 centimeters in length, with the thumb strongly set aside. These footprints were seen in the morning by all the employees of our institution who came to work on the last New Year's Eve. The police was called, but the policemen could not describe in any meaningful way the fact of the appearance of such strange footprints on a fairly large area of the sidewalk. And just a few months before the Samara events, almost all the central newspapers came out with the sensational headlines. It turned out that in July of 1989, very close to this region, in the Saratovo region, the guards of an orchard managed to catch a certain humanoid creature, similar in all respects to the notorious Yeti. The alien inadvertently climbed into the farmlands and ate apples there. The whole humor of the event was that the guards mistook the Bigfoot for an ordinary thief, attacked him, and even managed to collectively tie him up. However, upon closer inspection, the guards were surprised to see that the attacker they had caught did not understand human language, was covered with wool instead of clothing, and generally differed very noticeably from humans in size and behavior, as well as in the structure of the head, arms, and legs. Then the guards decided to report the incident to the authorities, and before their arrival, for lack of another room, they locked the trapped creature in the trunk of a passenger vehicle. However, they were unlucky there. The Yeti quickly managed to free himself from the ropes and opened the trunk, and then, taking the advantage of the absence of people nearby, simply absconded. So the eyes of the workers, of the executive committee, the police, and the scientists who arrived soon thereafter saw only a few patches of red fur and impressive footprints with a strange thumb set aside. Cryptozoologists consider it highly unlikely that the inhabited middle of Volga region now turns out to be a permanent habitat of large humanoid creatures unknown to science, which experts call relic hominoids. But at the same time, no one excludes regular visits to the region by abominable snowmen from more remote regions, in which encounters with them are considered more possible and even traditional. And since all three of the above reports date back to the year 1989, it is possible that it was during that season that a crisis of overpopulation arose in the population of these creatures, as a result of which individuals began to roam the world looking for new suitable places of residence. Biological science is well acquainted with such outbreaks of abundance in any kind of living organisms, which result in unexpected but very massive movement of creatures that are quite invisible in normal times: mice, squirrels, frogs, insects, and so on. The above messages or reports tell about events not very long ago. But if we turn to archival materials and historical evidence, we will see that reports of unusual humanoid creatures covered with fur were not something supernatural for the regions of the middle Volga River region in the past. Moreover, having studied the folklore of various ethnicities who have lived on the Volga for centuries, we can easily recognize the creature in the accounts I related, and in the descriptions of a number of fabulous creatures removing the fantastic husks, so to say, or aura from them. The same abominable snowman who, it turns out, existed peacefully for hundreds of years next to the middle Volga peasant farmer, and not even too much hiding from human beings. The very first historical mention of certain mysterious creatures living in the vicinity of the Samara Luka belongs to the pen of the secretary of the Baghdad embassy, Ahmed ibn Fadlan, who passed through this area in the years 1922-1923. I will put a link to the video I made about this observer, and I think you will like it. It's a very complicated, very interesting story. Anyway, he described the rivers Irgiz, Kinel, Sok, Kandurcha, Moka, Chapayevka, and some others flowing through the territory of the modern Samara region, and also reported that huge wild people leading an animal lifestyle reside in the Volga forests. The story of Ahmed ibn Fadlan is also echoed by lines from the famous Russian literary monument, the Word of Igor's Regiment, which mentions a certain div, a wild forest creature that looks like a human but cannot speak, does not know fire, and is covered with fur. There's also Bayanov's book titled Leshi. It's Leshi, nicknamed the monkey. I think that's the title. It summarizes information about humanoid creatures from the legends and tales of various people, ethnicities of Russia, including the middle Volga region. Based on them, the author draws the following conclusion. All the stories collected by folklorists over the decades have a completely material and by no means fantastic basis. Judge for yourself. The goblin, Leshy, from the Russian legends, is covered with fur. He shouts loudly at the whole forest, scaring passers-by, has an unpleasant animal smell, likes to sit on trees, stumps, and decks. The same thing is done by a mermaid, or is it a female Yeti, which even great Russian poet Alexander Pushkin describes as sitting on branches, referring to the trees. Although it would seem its original place of residence is rivers, lakes, and swamps, and not the forest at all. The explanation for this behavior of these characters is quite simple. Experts now believe that in Russia, since ancient times, peasants called goblin, referring to a male humanoid creature living in the forest, and the female creature was called a mermaid. But if the relict hominoid is supposed to be the closest relative of the ape, then it's understandable why it likes to climb trees and swing on branches so much. However, in ancient times, Russian Yetis were such rare creatures, and there were so few who saw them firsthand, that both goblins and mermaids were already perceived by the layman in Pushkin's time only as exclusively fairy tale characters. However, in the 19th century, scientists recorded a lot of evidence of encounters between residents of different Russian regions with forest monsters. Here's a note by a folklorist dated year 1848, which this scientist made from the words of peasants who had repeatedly seen such a creature in the vicinity of their village. In the Yanatayevsky district of the Astrakhan province, a mermaid is called a lobast. Lo and behold, behind the Yerik bayou, the girl is a lobast, naked, scratching her head, and her hair is long and her body is shaggy, but she laughs and claps her hands, and they're even more afraid. They don't want it to tickle them to death. All the people of the Middle Volga region have similar descriptions, and I'm referring to different ethnicities. The Chuvash, they have Arsuri, half man, and Upate, monkey, are forest women and men covered with fur who like to tickle those who pass by, who fall into their hands. There was a very interesting song by Vladimir Vysotsky, great Russian popular singer, about the subject that they will tickle until the human being starts hiccuping, and then they will drag him to the bottom of the lake. The Moldovan Vir Ara, forest goddess, after Al-Avav, water mother, and Joker are represented as women of huge stature, covered with black sparse fur, with disheveled long hair, sitting on branches and sometimes holding a child behind their backs. The Tatar Siuanasi, water mother, and Shurale were repeatedly caught in fishermen's nets, especially in remote flood-plain lakes, but each time they began to cry, and the fishermen set them free, because, according to beliefs, mercy towards the Shurale brings good luck. The Bashkir Shaitan, devil, is mortal. Like other similar creatures in the folklore of the people of the Volga region, and a person can kill them if necessary. Unlike the devils from the fairy tales, who, as you know, are not afraid of bullets or sabers. But it is not recommended to do this so as not to bring misfortune on the person's own house. There's even a story about how a certain peasant married a forest shaitanka, she-devil, and then from such cohabitation, the shaitanka had children. In short, the folk narrative. All these goblins and mermaids appear to be quite material, earthly creatures with very specific feelings, characteristic appearance, and a rather peaceful behavior. However, most of these descriptions relate either to the 19th century or to even earlier periods of Russian history. Even at the beginning of the 20th century, not to mention in the 1920s, 1930s, when large-scale industrial construction began in the middle of Volga, folklorists practically stopped encountering people who personally saw something humanoid and covered with fur in the surrounding forests. This is not surprising because according to all reports, the Volga forest Yetis do not tolerate anxiety, never settle close to more or less large settlements, and generally love untouched nature. So there is nothing surprising in the fact that for almost 100 years the inhabitants of European Russia have been drawing information about goblins and mermaids mainly from fairy tales. But modern cryptozoologists believe that the search for evidence of encounters with the relict hominoids in the European part of Russia in general and in the middle of Volga region in particular should be continued. And definitely I agree. If you look at my other videos about such creatures, you will see interesting parallels in other parts of Russia. Of course, again, Chukotka, Siberia, northern territories, even the Arctic to an extent. And I will continue my research. It's very interesting, and information comes from somewhat unexpected areas. So if you like my research, please support through the links you find in the description to this channel. Please like my video, subscribe to my channel. Please tell others about my work and stay tuned. I have a lot of information to share with you. Now about the Samara Oblast. It's a federal subject of Russia, an oblast. Its administrative center is the city of Samara. The oblast borders Tatarstan in the north, Orenburg Oblast in the east, Kazakhstan, actually West Kazakhstan province in the south, Saratov Oblast in the southwest, and Ulyanovsk Oblast in the west. It is located in three natural landscape zones: the forest zone, coniferous and broad-leaved forests, the basis of which is pine-oaked forests, pine forest, and broad-leaved forests, with the participation of oak and maple. Spruce occasionally joins them, and the areas of the southern regions are quite beautiful too. So if you ever visit, you will like the forests and the mushrooms. Favorite pastime of the Russian people, collecting mushrooms and more. Just look behind you once in a while so you're not surprised if a relic hominoid joins you in picking mushrooms. Thank you for your attention to my work.